Hello all, welcome to Netbook and welcome back to MuleSoft tutorials. Today I'm planning to talk about how we can create a contacts API design in Anypoint Design Center. In my previous video, I explained about saying, but I used Visual Editor to design contacts API. But today I'm going to explain about how we can use text editor to create this contact API. As part of this, I'm going to talk about what is contact API, what are the resources we are going to define, and what are the data types we are going to define. That is what I'm going to discuss. The contact API is something to manage a contacts either in mobile or in any email application or anywhere. We use contact API. When I say maintaining contacts, imagine I want to store a new contact details in my mobile. So that is create. I can view the contact details. I can update the contact details. I can delete the contact details. So these functionalities we call as maintaining a contact. To programmatically to show them, we use contacts API. Internally, it uses APIs whenever you store any contact in your mobile. Whenever you open your contacts and see some contact details, it will be used internally view contacts, right? So this we are going to implement as a API. As part of this, we can define resources like if you want to create a new contact, we can use a post method and resource name as slash contact. If you want to view contacts, we use a get method and you are going to see particularly one person's contact details. Using that ID you are going to retrieve. So your resource will be slash contact slash ID is the URI parameter over here. As well as if you want to retrieve the contacts and see like first name is starting with a key, you can use a get method slash contacts, whatever we are going to filter out based on this condition like first name. We can use this resource. Update contact. To update any contact, I mean editing any contact, we use a put method and resource will be slash contact slash ID. Particularly, you are going to edit one contact at a time. That's why the URI parameter is mandatory over here. And you can delete a contact. You can use a delete method and resource will be slash contact slash ID because of you are going to delete the particularly one contact so that you can use this resource for that. Now, whenever you are going to create a contact, that means whenever you are going to save any contact in your mobile, you are going to enter first name, last name, date of birth, email ID, phone number, or company. But some of the fields might be optional like company, email ID, those. But this kind of information we will save it into mobile, right? So your input will be this. So create contact request is one of the data type for entering the details. And as soon as you save it, it will internally store it with some ID. It will be generated ID and all the details will be stored into your mobile. So this is looks like the response what it is going to return as a create contact. Now if you fetch same contact details using the get method, the same details like get contact details with the ID, first name, last name, date of birth, email ID, phone and company details is going to come over here. And when you update it, if you edit any contact, particularly one contact, you might update details, you might send it over here like this. And as soon as you send it this updated details, the same details after updating will return as a response, update contact response. And for delete, you will be passing the ID, whichever the ID you want to delete it. You won't get any response because of once you delete the contact, nothing will be there. No content will be written, but it will return as a successful response. These things, how we can design in a Anypoint design center, that is what we are going to see today now. As part of this, I'm going to say create a specification and then I can say API overview, then define resources, define data types, then define examples, test it. So these are the things we are going to discuss now. I'm going to explain how we can do that. First of all, create a specification in a text editor. So I'm going to go to Anypoint platform. I click on Design Center over here, start designing, which will be used for designing any APIs. Now over here under projects, create a new, you can see new API specification. Click on this. I can give it some name over here. I can say contacts API and click on create API specification. Okay, sorry. So I'm comfortable with the designing one. So that option we need to select if you want to write design your API in text editor. Now the text editor is opened over here. As part of this, now the create specification is clear, right? Now the API overview. In API overview, I'm going to write like what protocol it is going to support and description about your API, what is the URL, those things I'm going to define over here. So what I can say, API overview, first of all, in API overview, you can see the suggestions are going to come over here, even if you want to write in a text editor also. In visual editor, you used to type in the form, but here it will give a suggestion what all things you can write it over here. So over here, you can see in the root, I can define a version. So I will say v1.0 is my version. Click on enter. As soon as you enter it, it will give again suggestions over here. I want to define a base URL. So in the base URL, I will say slash v1 slash API. That is what I'm going to give as my base URI. Now, again, click on enter. Now you can see what protocol it is going to support. You can mention here protocols. You can see it can support HTTP or HTTPS. So you can specify whatever the protocols you want to define. Now click on next. Over here, you can see that media type. I want to my application support JSON data. So I can select that. So this is the basic information about your API. And if you want to give some description, documentation, if you see in the documents, there is a description. I can click on description. I can give a description. This API is used for maintaining contacts for your applications. So this is the documentation, the description about this API I'm going to provide over here. So that is about API overview. So in the API overview, the version I defined, base URI, protocols what it is going to support, media type, and description I have defined. The next thing, what I'm going to discuss, defining the resources. As I mentioned already, we have a list of resources over here for creating a contact, viewing contacts, updating, deleting purpose. So if you see the contacts is my one of the resource. Over here, I define contacts enter. So this is one of the resource. And if I go to the view contacts, update contact and delete contact, the resource is same for all of them. So I can copy the same thing. I can put it this way, right? But I have contacts over here already. If you want to not to keep it, if you see this is the root, this is also root. If you don't want to keep it in such a way, you can remove it and you can give a one tab over here. That means this ID is comes under these contacts. You can define in such a way also. But if you put it this way in the root, again this is going to be the different. I will show how it is. If you go to this endpoints, see this is contacts and this is ID because of it is in the root. But when you select here and give one tab over here, and if you can see now contacts and that you have an ID as another resource. That means two resources separately. You can define that way or you can define this way also like slash contacts and put it this way also. It is same. Okay. But if you are not going to define this, you can put it one tab so that ID will come as part of this under this contacts. That is how we can define the resources. Now the defining of resources is done and we need to have a methods, right? These methods we need to define. So how we can define those methods? Now if I go to the context, I need to define method over here. You can see this is the first method I can define. And if you want to see here the description and the display name, you can give it to them. Here, click on display name. I can say the display name as here create contact. Now we can see as soon as it is updates over here, let it save it. Once it is saved, when you select this method, you can see create contact is going to show the display name. And now when I click on enter description, I can enter this. This resource is used for create new contact. I entered that. It is going to show over here the description about this. It is still loading. You can see that. Now you can see this is how it is going to show over here. That is the description about your resource. Similarly, now this resource has three methods, right? I have a get method, put method, delete method. What I can do, you can see that get method, enter it. If you bring back your cursor in the same level, it will show the options over here. Put method, I want to keep it. Again, bring back into the same level the cursor and delete method. These are the three methods I want to define under this resource, right? So I have defined in such a way. Now I can go back over here summary and see that over here under this resource, I have these three methods over here. And you can see here, click on enter, the display name you can give here. I can say get contact details and enter it. Again, the description you can keep it over here. And I can say, let me copy paste. This resource is used for, I think for is missing over here, for view contact details. Contact details. That is the description I'm going to give over here. Then similarly, in the put method also, I'm going to define description, display name as well as description. The display name is update contact. And the description I'm going to give over here, this resource is used for edit a contact details or edit contact details. That is how I can give the description. Delete method. I'm going to put as display name as well as description over here. Delete contact. And I'm going to define this description also over here. This resource is used for remove or delete contact details. That is how we can define a resources with the methods. Now you can see this is how it is looks like. Now the next thing is what you want to do for each method, you should have some input and output. For the first, you will have input as well as output, and for the view, you will have only output, and for update, you will have an input as well as output. For the delete, you will not have anything. It will have only the URI parameter. Now, what you want to do? Now we want to define these data types, right? For the input and output. I have already mentioned in my documentation over here. So this is create contact request, right? Now I can copy this. I want to define this data type. How I can define that? Now go back over here. I'm going to create a folder over here. I'm going to say data types. And this folder is something, it is a good practice to maintain, but it is not a mandatory to create a folder, but it is a good practice to keep it folder like this. Now under that, if you see over here, there is a place, click on new file. Under this, if you see that specification, under this you can see there is something called data type. So the data, whatever it is going to have for your application, to store this data, we use data type. Now I'm going to define that data type, create contact request .raml. Click on create. Now over here, you have something properties like first name, last name, date of birth, email, phone, company. Now this you need to define the properties. Now click on next over here. You can see that properties, under properties, you need to type all these things now. So that this is first name. I'm going to define a first name over here. Enter. What is the type of this first name? you can put a type over here. It is a string type, I can say. It is a required field. Now you can define last name. Similarly, type will be string again. Enter. Now what is the next thing we have? Date of birth. So the date of birth, I'm going to copy over here, and type will be over here, date time. Okay. So this is the date time. Now the next thing is, this is optional. I want to give optional. I can say required. I can say false over here. With this, you can see now it is an optional field. This is how we can define the optional fields. Now the next thing is email. Email. And I'm going to say it is also string type. One more thing is you can define this way also string. Okay. This is going to take as a string type. You don't need to define this way. You can define this also. And if you see over here, this is email is required now, but I want to make it optional. How I can do? The other way, instead of using this tag, you can use another tag called question mark over here. When you put a question mark, that will be takes as a optional. So if you want to define a property within a single line, you can define this way. Or if you want to define with elaboration, you can define this way also. Right? Now I'm going to define phone and company. Phone, I'm going to say type here. Now company, this is also string type. So I'm going to define in a single line. So that will be mandatory, it is taking this over here. Or if you say enter type string, and I can say required false. That is how also I can define. So when you are saving your contacts, mainly you need to enter first name, last name, and phone number, which are maybe mandatory. Your date of birth, email, and company might be optional. So that's why I have defined in such a way. In this, I have explained about how I can define a property with elaboration, how I can define a property with a single line. That is also I have shown over here. Clear? And if you want to give an example also, you can give that example over here also. If I see over here, example, I can define like over here, okay, that is how I can define the example also. Over here, it is going to show the example is Arki. And last name also, example, I can say something, I can put it over here like this. And over here, if I go, and you can see that it is defined such a way. And date of birth also, example, and make sure that this is date time format, right? In that case, you need to have the date time format. I will say 1990 something. I will put it over here. Now this is how the date format should be looks like. It is a date time, right? I can say maybe date data type. If it is a date data type, it will have only the date, not the time. Okay. So now if I go to this, you can see that example is looks like this. That is how we can define examples also. So over here also, but in this case, if you have, you can't keep it example like this. See this now, if we define in a single line this one, and you can't keep example like this. That's why if you have examples and all so many things, if you want a tags, then you need to have separate over here. You can't define in a single line. Okay. So I'm going to remove that now. Okay. So, and phone, I can define a phone also example over here. I can put some number over here. I will say something, so I can define phone over here like this. And company also I can define something over here. Example, I can say netbook. Yeah. So that is how we can define a data type. This is request, right? I want to create a response. So let me copy this name. So I'm going to create a new file. It is a data type over here. I'm going to select over here and I can say this is response. So in the response, as soon as you create a data type as a the new contact, there will be new ID will be generated along with the existing details. Now what I can do, I can copy paste the complete details over here in the response. Only the thing I'm going to do over here is I'm going to add ID over here and type will be string example. I'm going to say some value over here, whatever I have something. This is example. That is how we can define a response over here. Now I want to define the responses for each of them, not only responses, other data types. So I have something called get contact response. So new file data type get contact response. It is exactly same as create contact response. I'm going to copy paste over here. Similarly, I have to create another data type called update contact request. I'm going to go to the data type, new data type, and click on create. Over here also, it is same as this get contact response. I'm going to keep it this. Now with updated details, it is going to create. Similarly, I have another data type last, that is update contact details response, sorry. New file data type. Now, which is going to have the similar response, I can keep it. So this is how it is there. Now, if you see, all these data types has a similar data type, right? So similar values are there, similar properties. You can keep it some common name, the meaningful name, and you can reuse a single data type also. You don't need to create this many also. Like contact details, I can keep it as one of this name. I can reuse them also. That will be, once you are familiar with all these things, then you can define in such a way reusing the code and here. That is how we can define a data types over here. Now, these defined data types, how I can use it in my application. So go to the contact main API over here. If I go to this create contact, which we should have input and output, right? So we can enter over here. The body is your input. It is going to accept a JSON data. I selected application slash JSON. You can see the suggestions are giving over here. And under that, the type over here, I can define the type over here. Now I want to access this data type. To access the data type, you can see exclamatory symbol, include, you can include this file. Under that, you can see data types. I have create contact request. That is how I can select over here. Under body, it accepts JSON data. The type will be create contact request. Now click on enter, bring back your cursor same as body level, and you can see it will give some responses, right? You can select the responses over here. This many response types it can be written by your API. So for successful case, it is a 200, that is success, and it is going to return some data that will come in a body, and that data will be JSON data. I'm going to select a JSON over here. The type will be over here. I can include the response object over here. Data types, create contact response. That is how I can define. Similarly, now I'm going to copy paste this complete responses. For the get method, you will not have any input body. You will have only the responses. Okay, it is a responses. So I'm going to copy paste this one over here, the responses, and make sure that this level of intention is important. Under responses, 200 it is going to return, and it is going to return data type get contact response format. That is how it is going to have. Similarly, in the put method, I'm going to copy paste this complete body from here, from the create contact and the responses also. Copy this part, and I hope you got some clarity now how to write this intention of these levels. So make sure you can practice them. Now you can see put method have input body, that is a JSON data, and this JSON data will be update contact request, and it is going to return a response. Successful is 200, and it is going to be JSON data as a response. In the response data type, it is going to update contact response. Now for the delete method, you will not have any response. So there is a responses over here, but it is going to be successful. All 200 and 201, 202, these things will be successful response. 204 is something called no content return. That means it is not going to return any content. So I define 204 over here. Because of once I delete the contact, nothing is there going to be shown over here. That's why 204 and no response is going to show over here. Clear? That is how we can use those data types, whatever we defined over here. Now, what I want to do is I can define the examples and I can use it in this project. How I can do? Click on place over here, new folder. I will say examples, create it, and I can save over here. Contact request is, I'm not going to define so many over here. If you want, you can define that also with the same names, but I'm going to reuse them. New file. I want to define a JSON data. So I'm going to select others. There is a JSON over here. You can see contact request and click on JSON over here. Under this, what I'm going to do, the create contact request, I'm going to copy paste it over here. So this is create contact request. I'm going to copy this data. Now what I'm going to do, another data type another example I'm going to create, new file. This is other file. I'm going to say contact details. Click on create. So what it is going to come more? It is going to come ID is extra. It is going to generate and going to give you as a response. So this is the response. That is the contact details. That is how I define. Now I want to reuse this. I want to use them in my application design. If we go to the create contact over here, in the input over here, if you see its body, after the immediate over here, you can define an example over here, and I can include that file, the request file. Include examples contact request. Now, in the response, it is going to return contact details example, right? Example, and I can include the file, include examples contact details. That is how I can return like this. Similarly, if I go to the get contact, it is going to return contact details. I can define this example like the same thing. I can copy paste it. For the updating, I need to pass updated contact details. So I'm going to pass example as contact details over here like this. And it is going to return all the contact details about the updated details. So I'm going to define the same things over here. The delete, you don't need to define anything because of it is not going to return any response. It is going to take a input as ID and it is going to delete it. Now you can see that this is completed my design now. This is what we discussed now. And if we see any errors, if you want to see any errors or anything, you can see that over here. You see that date is something issue. It's not going to be the date. It's going to be the date only. Okay. So in all the data types, you need to edit that date only. It's not date data type. You have a date only data type. So let me edit this date only. It is going to give you error all over here if you defined unknown data type over here. It is clear. Now you can see there is no errors over here. My application design is done for the contact API. And this is the beautiful document which is generated over here. Now, if I go to my main file over here, this is related to your API basic information, and these are the endpoints, that is the resources along with the methods. And if I want to test now, I want to test this application now, how I can test it? Click on post over here, try it out, and over here from this drop down select mock service, and from here you can see this is the input you are passing and send request. And over here you can see this is the response you are going to get it over here, right? This is the successful response. And if I go back over here in the document, over here, there is a delete method. Try it out. Over here, you need to select a mock service. And what is the ID you want to delete? Some random number I'm going to give. This is just a designing application. How it is going to look like API, that is what it is going to be. Send it. And now you can see no content 204 it is written. That means there is no body is going to have for 204. And now if I select a get method, try it out. I'm going to select mock service, and in the URI parameter, I'm going to enter some ID over here. If we send a request, sorry, this is get method, right? You will not have any body in the input. This is the get method. And you see that over here, you get a 200 with a successful response over here. Similarly, I can test a put method over here that is updating contact details, try out, and mock service I'm going to select, and this is the ID which I want to update it. Like maybe if I want to update some name or something, I update it and click on send. It is going to give you the successful response over here with updated details. That is how it is designing of your API can be done in a text editor. Hope this is clear. So we will implement some more things over here, reusing some of these data types and implementing security and all. I will be discussing in my next video. That's it for today. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe, Netbook. See you in the next video.